You are Locked On Bulls Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Chicago on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Bulls Postcast here on the Locked On Sports Chicago YouTube channel. Joe George here with you, and the Bulls win this game 133-124 in the first game as the Zach LaVine era is officially over for the Chicago Bulls. Of course, we're talking about Buzelis and his 10-for-10 night. Incredible game for the rookie. The new roles on this team. We'll do the best and worst moments of this game, and a bunch of rumors, not even rumors, reports from Casey Johnson that I think are going to bum a lot of Bulls fans out that we got mid-game here about the future of this team in just the next 2 days and what the deadline is going to look like. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're here for the first time. If you're listening on audio, thanks for checking us out as well. Come on over to YouTube. We're live after every single game. No matter what happens at the deadline, we will be here live on the Locked On Sports Chicago YouTube channel. So hit that subscribe button, and let's talk about it. Buzelis, what a game for this rookie. Look, this is what you're kind of waiting for. The whole season, it feels like. You're waiting for Zach LaVine to get traded. You're waiting for this team to head in a direction, and that is the tank. Now, the trade return, a lot of people don't like it. I get it. I don't really love it either. Getting only your first back, in which you're still technically a play-in team above the Philadelphia 76ers, the return's not great. There's no way to deny that. But what it does mean, and look, LaVine's been out the last couple games, so like we kind of saw like a little preview of what this was going to be like. But now that he's officially gone, what matters the most going forward is the development of the young players on this roster. And as we will get to in the rumors section of the show, at the end of the show, that Vucevic is expecting to be here with the Bulls after the deadline, and the Lonzo Ball trade market is not exactly what the Bulls want it to be. So both guys still might be here, so they might half-ass this thing. But for tonight, we saw what Zach LaVine texted some of the young Bulls players of this is your opportunity to go out there and show what you can do. And my God, did Buzelis show what he could do in this game. We're going to start in reverse order. That heat check three to make it 111-107 in favor of the Heat was electric. That guy is fully confident. We've talked about his jump shot, his dribbling. Those were the things that were like red flags about Modest, or not even red flags, but like this is what he needs to work on the most. He looked so comfortable in this game, and it wasn't just attacking to the rim. Maybe my favorite play of the night was the Lonzo Ball pass to Modest when he was just sitting by the hoop, wide open, stayed in his spot, sealed off his guy, got the big slam, but he's just hitting everything he wants from anywhere on the floor. He's making good defensive efforts. He gets the offensive foul charge in the third or fourth quarter there. He's just doing a little bit of everything in this game, like we've seen him do at times this season. Like we've seen Buzelis have really strong stretches of basketball throughout the season, but tonight is obviously the one where just full on the Buzelis experience in this game. You just can't say enough good things about him. The confidence to start shooting early, the fact that Billy Donovan, yes, I was kind of mentally preparing as he checks him out at the end of the game to crush Billy Donovan if the Bulls lost this game because of offense when he was a perfect, shooter on the night. But it worked out for the Bulls. They won this game. They closed out well against the Heat. But Buzelis not being out there, I think, was interesting, that he was still not a closer with the performance that he had, because that's just not something, like, as the game's playing out, I was honestly expecting. Now, he had been out there for a while, so maybe that's part of it, is Billy Donovan thought maybe he was a little bit gassed. But look, Modest goes 10 for 10 from the field tonight, 4 for 4 from the three-point line, only 3 rebounds, which is a little bit lower than what we typically see, but he still had 2 blocks in this game, only 1 turnover. And, in the first game without Zach LaVine, I think one of the best things about this game is that they were down early. They also did a really good job managing the turnovers. We've seen this team time and time again be very turnover happy, whether it's reckless passes, the jump passes that they were just talking about all night on the broadcast with both Stacey King and Adam Amin sick apparently. But Buzelis was just confident from the get-go in this game, and it just makes me so excited for the rest of the season, because we know they're not going to hold on to this playing spot. Even if they don't trade Vooch and they don't trade Lonzo and they keep this team as is, we know they're going to fall into the top 10. And not that it matters anymore because they have their own pick back, but we know they're going to fall out of the play-in tournament. They're not going to hold on to this with Joel Embiid returning for the Philadelphia 76ers, and they're going to fall out of the plan. Even with Zach LaVine, if they stuck with this team as it was, they were likely going to fall out of it no matter what. So seeing Modest get, a career high in minutes, a career high in points, is everything you want to see going forward from this team. This is a good win for the Bulls, and not just a win like in terms of like the actual basketball that happened, just the first step of this next era of where largely you're going to lose these games, but you just want to see the development, and that's what matters most. Like I'll say it time and time again now that like as this season will likely unravel in a very negative way, if Buzelis can have these types of performances, not 10 for 10 obviously, but high scoring outputs with good defense, good shot blocking, good rebounding, once a week, once every 10 days, it's just going to keep getting me at least something to finally attach to as a Bulls fan when you think about the future of the Chicago Bulls, because it's been so mid, so bad, so every word you want to call it of mediocre during the LaVine era, that now that it's over, it finally feels like, even though I don't trust this front office, at least now you have a player that's someone that we can all be excited about. We can all be invested in on a nightly basis and just watching him. And that's kind of what I felt like was happening, not just because of how the performance of it, but because of the direction the team's going. I felt like I was just watching Buzelis the whole game. I think this is a great point from Zach here in the chat. We need a Bulls player that people want to buy the jersey of. Yes. Like that's what they need. You can't buy a Lonzo jersey or a Vooch jersey because they may or may not be traded or on this team next year or on this team on Saturday. You're probably not buying a Dalen Terry jersey. You're probably not, super invested in Coby White at this point because it feels like anything is possible in the NBA after watching Luka Doncic get traded to the Los Angeles Lakers, which is still super bizarre seeing him on the bench in LA tonight. But this is a guy that you can invest in as a fan. And this performance, it's one game, yes. It was just a rewarding one game to see this, that, look, hey, front office, like knock, knock. This is what can happen when you draft in the lottery and you're not a play-in team, is you can have someone that you can look at and say, there is a developmental path to where this guy could go, and who knows what the heights could be, what the ceiling is, what the floor is for Buzelis, but we got that taste in this game versus the Heat of just, this is a guy that can score, can play defense, can rebound, can just do a little bit of everything, and can be a good, at minimum, probably a really, really good role player if this team actually ever figures something out and builds to a winning basketball team, which skeptical because of the front office, which again we'll hit on when we get to the rumors and the reports we got from Casey Johnson. But this was a lot of fun to watch. In the first game post-Zach LaVine era, I've been looking forward to these postcast shows, this version of it way more than what it was the last week, as the trade deadline's approaching, of just, if they didn't trade anyone, this show was going to be mostly all about, like, you have to make the play-in tournament, basically, if you don't get your first back, because that's clearly what the plan for the front office was going to be. Where at least now, even if they're going to half-effort this thing, the plan is to head towards the bottom of the NBA. And frankly, if they were to miss, even if they were to make the play-in, and it's because of performances like this from Modest Buzelis, even though we all want them to tank, I wouldn't be mad at it. I would still want the better lottery pick, obviously. I would want that lottery pick to be much higher, the percentages, but even if somehow this was like just a sign of what's to come from Buzelis on this team, it's a good day for the Bulls fans, because at least we got to see the Bulls heading in a direction that's out of the middle, and with that came a young player with a really impressive performance in the first game post Zach LaVine. I'm curious what's next for this team, what other changes they'll make, not just with the roster if they don't happen, but will we see these roles continue to develop and change? Because I think there's a couple observations for me from tonight's game that I think are really interesting, that now that LaVine's officially gone, of what this team is going to look like for the rest of the season in terms of rotations, closing minutes, all that stuff we're going to get into next year on the Locked On Bulls postcast and the Locked On Sports Chicago YouTube channel. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are some of your relationship green flags? We often hear about the red flags we should avoid, but what if we focused more on identifying the positive signs in our relationships, those green flags? If you're not sure what they look like, therapy can help you identify them, actively practice them, and even embody that green flag energy yourself. Whether you're dating, married, building a friendship, or just working on yourself, therapy can help you form relationships that love you back. Therapy helps you develop healthy boundaries and improves your communication skills. It empowers you to set up clear expectations and express your needs in relationships, and therapy provides tools for managing conflict in ways that strengthen connections rather than break them down. BetterHelp makes it easy by offering online therapy with over 30,000 licensed therapists to choose from. And if you need to switch therapists, you can do so at no extra cost. Discover your relationship green flags with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. So even if this team stays as currently constructed, the roles that now are easier to get a view on post Zach LaVine. We saw just a small switch up in today's game. Patrick Williams is the first guy off the bench. Modest Buzelis comes off next. That to me is a nothing burger. They'll be the first two guys off the bench. I think today it was specifically because of the matchup problems that the Heat were having, because the Heat were having their way. I mean, the one thing that didn't change in this game, at least in the first half, was the defense. I mean, the Bulls gave up 70 points in the first half. Now, they had a much better second half, only giving up, 52 points in the second half of this game? Yeah, 52 points in the second half. So, obviously, they locked down a little bit. The Heat were on an incredible hot streak early in this game, just ripping threes left and right. But we saw there in the fourth quarter, they had gone like a 4-minute stretch where they hadn't scored a bucket as the Bulls were on a big run to get a lead. When Giddey tied it 114-114, that was right when the Heat were on an absolute cold stretch, and the Bulls had really just taken advantage of what happened. We saw a couple really nice defensive plays in a different 11-3 run earlier in the game that made it 77-75 when Josh Giddey hit that corner three. So a lot of good defensive moments in the second half. But how these roles change now, I think it was interesting watching this game from like the lens of knowing that LaVine is not coming back. So assuming that everything stays as put, I think that none of this will really change. Patrick Williams, I think, is going to come off the bench the rest of the season. He continued again in this game to look very efficient and just looked much better again coming out of the game. Like, yes, he goes 3 for 8 from the field, but another night, 10 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, plus 18 in the plus-minus category tonight. So Patrick Williams, again, continued to excel. Interesting that he closed this game, that even though he's not a starter, that, Billy Donovan rewarded him with his play and let him stay out there in the final moments of this game to close out the Miami Heat. I think that's a great sign that, Billy Donovan before the game talked about wanting to be a part of building something. He kind of dispelled those reports, those, I guess, rumors, because I guess he didn't directly say that he didn't want to be part of a rebuild in Oklahoma City. So we talked more about, like, being part of something, and I'm still very pro no matter how this season goes, no matter what Buzelis develops into the rest of the year, coaching change. I still think that there's too often the Bulls, their history of not performing well against bad teams with LaVine, that to me is still a huge reflection of the coach. So, I still think that even though Billy Donovan is saying that he is willing to be part of this rebuild today before the game started, I'm still pretty in favor of bringing in a different coach after the year. I just think it's a better fit. So Patrick Williams stays in this role, will likely continue to stay in this role, but obviously without LaVine, it does change your closing group quite a bit. Now, again, Buzelis didn't close this game, which was interesting to me because the way he was shooting, Billy Donovan still felt the need to close with his vets. I totally get that. I really do. I totally understand the concept, the coaching behind it. Counterpoint, you're not going to make the playoffs. I kind of want to see what Modest Buzelis does in a closeout game. I want to see how he does defensively, how he does in clutch moments. I want to see that. That's what I want from the Bulls. Like, I want to see him play more during the game. I want to see him play at the end of these close games. no matter what your standing is, because even if you make the play-in tournament, you're a one and done and you're going home and you're having a late lottery pick. So I hope that does change, that if Buzelis continues to play at an efficient level on offense and defense, that he will continue to get some run in crunch time, or get more run in crunch time. Because that's just me, for me, is something I want to see more of the rest of the year. Just fully go on in with the development here. The rest of the closing group was virtually the same, though. Josh Giddey was out there for a little bit and eventually came out of the game. Still, he's the one where, you trade him. He's part of the whole, trade Alex Caruso, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine group that got you no first-round picks besides your own. If you're going to trade for him, I still can't believe he doesn't close for this team. Honestly, I hope that changes. I hope that changes, too. I want to see Josh Giddey closing games. My reason why is because the front office is going to have to contemplate giving him a contract. You don't trade him, and you don't trade for him, at least without that idea in mind. So now that you're clearly heading in a direction, and that direction is towards the bottom, and that direction is towards the future, I think another one, just like with Modest Buzelis, is what does Josh Giddey do in closing time? That if he's not an efficient three-point shooter, which he had a solid night from the three-point line tonight, how does he affect the game offensively and defensively at the end of the game? So that's another thing I hope that changes as we get past the trade deadline. And look, we don't know what's going to happen with Kevin Huerter and Trey Jones and Zach Collins. They're obviously there tonight. They're going to be in Minnesota for tomorrow night's game. They keep saying they're going to play on Saturday, but all the reports is that these guys are not going to. They're going to try to keep these guys off of the Bulls roster pretty much at all costs, it seems like, before Saturday's game. And they're going to try to flip them in different trades and build with the group that they currently have. I do get that. I am kind of intrigued by Kevin Huerter. If he stuck around, I would be kind of in favor of that. Honestly, he's the one guy that they got that I'm intrigued by, at least. And look, these are all expiring contracts, but he's just the one of the three that I'm most interested in, I would say. And kind of hoping, unless the Bulls get something, of young value in return, whether that's draft capital or a young player, I kind of hope they just stick with him. So it feels like, for the most part, it is going to be status quo for what these roles are. And even these things that I'm wishing for, we're probably not going to see Billy Donovan put into place. Lonzo Ball obviously was terrible in this game for a while, and we'll hit on that a little bit in the best and worst too, but really struggled to score. Surprises me that they're not going to be more aggressive and try to move him at the deadline. Was more surprising when I saw reports today that they might try to bring him back. And again, I like Lonzo Ball and his leadership and what he brings to a basketball team, but didn't think that re-signing him would be something that was in the cards for the Bulls. All right, let's get into the best and worst and what Casey Johnson was tweeting out during the game, because it does make things dramatically different of, I think, our expectations for what's going to happen and go down in the next 48 hours. We'll get into that next here on the Locked On Bulls postcast on the Locked On Sports Chicago YouTube channel. Super Bowl 59 is here. Two teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. All right, best and worst moments of this game. And I think I will include the worst in this as the reports that came out, while we're going to kind of combo these together, because a little disheartening, I would say, from what we got from Casey Johnson during this game. Worst moments, Lonzo Ball, 0 for 6, that missed dunk. Good effort, but yikes. That was a tough one for him. Very happy, obviously, when his floater went in on his 7th shot of the game. Hit a clutch 3 later on, I think it was. But a really tough night from Lonzo Ball in this one. And that is where, it's still, while I like Lonzo, I like the idea of Lonzo being a member of the Bulls. Would probably rather at this point now, I've changed my tune a little bit. If you listened before about wanting to keep him. But this is probably where like you have to take the good with the bad of where he's at in his return to the NBA. And even before, it's not like he was the most consistent scorer on the planet, but it just feels like now, specifically in this new version of Lonzo, he has like ice cold stretches that happen. Best moments, it's all Modest Buzelis, man. It's all Modest in this game. The three at the buzzer to make it 70-60 at the end of the half was huge. The three there, the back-to-back threes that he had after the Bulls were down 103-94. Those threes, eventually, it was the second one made it 111-107. So he really is a huge reason why you got this back into the game. The one that was the dropped pass by Vooch that ended up in Modest's hands to make it 93-88. Those were great. Drawing the offensive foul when the Heat, I can't remember who it was, but was just putting his shoulder into him constantly. Maybe Modest flopped a little bit, but it's the NBA. Like, that's part of it. But putting his shoulder into him, and, you know, Modest goes in there, gets it. The alley-oop from Josh Giddey to Modest Buzelis, followed by the crossover on the next possession. All that stuff. Those are all the Modest plays, it feels like, from tonight's game. Those were all the great moments. And then I think Ayo, too, had a couple nice ones where as they're trying to close this thing out, he goes to the rim a couple times back-to-back. He looked really comfortable in tonight's game. Thought the three-point shot for him, too, looked good. He ended up going just 2 for 2 from the three-point line, but he looked good. Coby White had an efficient night. This is overall, like, if you were thinking, like, play-in's my goal as a Bulls fan or as part of the front office, like, you would chalk this up in a huge W column for the Bulls. Not that I think any of us really want that. The Bulls front office probably still does. And I think that's where we're going to get into now, these rumors and reports that came out from Casey Johnson. But we'll go back to the Lonzo one. A report earlier today coming out was that the Bulls are even interested in keeping Lonzo Ball and trying to get him back in the offseason and trying to keep him, retain him as a member of the team. Totally get that, at least in terms of the concept of having a leader on the roster. I don't agree with it at this point. Like, I would just trade everyone that I possibly can. We had the report also from Joe Cowley from the Sun-Times that if the Bulls can get deals done, they want to get they want to get rid of the new 3 players. Basically, the one they want to keep, but rumored, is Zach Collins. So that's maybe the guy to keep an eye on the most. Maybe it's Kevin Huerter and Trey Jones that are most likely to be flipped after the deadline. But here's what we got from Casey Johnson, thus making it the worst moments of tonight's game, because these are a bummer, to be honest with you. So we'll start here. For the latest Bulls chatter from Casey Johnson, everything's fluid, but optimism, this is a quote, for more moves that surfaced Monday dried up some on Tuesday. Nikola Vucevic is now prepared to be here past the deadline as the Warriors have shifted attention to bigger targets, including Kevin Durant, who was scratched from tonight's Phoenix Suns game. So the Warriors are looking at KD. So they're moving off Vooch. Vooch doesn't make sense for the Lakers anymore because he doesn't play defense, and neither does Luka. And at times, neither does LeBron. So don't really think he's a fit there anymore. Lonzo Ball is drawing interest in, but in order to get draft capital, the Bulls would have to take on long-term money, which is not something they want to do. Which, if you do think about like the logic of that, does draft capital outweigh getting a longer-term contract back to give you less flexibility? Well, you're not going anywhere. So yes, you are. Now, if it's second-round picks, you can keep Lonzo. If you're getting offered like 2 seconds, those picks don't matter. Those picks rarely hit. Second rounders are, to me, like 6th and 7th rounders in the NFL. They're mostly useless. No offense to the guys mostly drafted in the second round. And the Bulls have a couple that have turned out to be okay players or good players, but largely second round picks are a huge waste. So that's where we're at with Lonzo and Vooch. And apparently there was interest from the Bucks, Warriors, the Nuggets, and the Pistons as well, all about Zach LaVine before he was actually traded to the Kings. So it feels like, to me, what those reports are saying from Casey Johnson is that on Saturday's game, when we're back here, because we'll be back tomorrow as well for the Timberwolves game, but when we're back here on Saturday, that Zach Collins, between what Casey Johnson and Joe Cowley report is, Zach Collins could be part of this team. Kevin Huerter likely will not. Trey Jones likely will not. They will try to move them. They will obviously move them for pretty much anything. That's where second-round picks, I think, do come into play, just because, like, if you don't want them here, then they're just part of the salary match with Zach LaVine. The Bulls clearly didn't think they were going to get anything out of them in terms of the players itself. But to hear Vooch might be sticking around bums me out, man. Like, I like Vooch the player. He's fun to watch at times, but he shouldn't be a Bull anymore. There's no way to cut it. Nikola Vucevic should not be here anymore. He should be traded for pretty much anything that you can get. First, second, salary dumps, long-term contracts, short-term contracts. There's no point. You got to get at least one piece in a Vooch trade that can be a part of a building block of the future. And to think he's just going to be around, it really just doesn't make any sense. Like why you... I know the Bulls front office wants to have a standard, and that seems to be the problem here. They want to have a standard for these trades, and they're not meeting them in terms of what they're being offered by other teams. Now, whether they held on too long, and that kind of feels like what it is for me, is my gut tells me is the Bulls misread the interests of their players and thought if we hold, the closer we get to the deadline, we will get more. And now what we're hearing about Vooch in this report from Casey Johnson is it seems to be the opposite, is that the closer we're getting to the deadline and, now that Kevin Durant's particularly potentially available and the Warriors want to bring him back for one last dance with Steph Curry and Draymond, that if they're going to try to do that and they're off Vooch, then the Bulls are basically just stuck with him. I'm surprised there's not more interest in Vooch from other teams in the league, that there's not like somebody that looks at him, the double-doubles, and maybe they view him in the way I think it was clear the trade market viewed Zach LaVine, which is an empty stat guy. And I think that to me is where, I'm not super upset about the return. I don't love it, again, but I think what it told you is that the market for Zach LaVine is that people don't view him as a, ultimate winning basketball player, and that most of his stats, deficiency on defense, injury history, meant he's not worth what the Bulls are asking for, and what the Bulls decided to do in return was just get the guaranteed lottery pick back for this year, and it probably felt like they could have got more, and we'll see what they flip these guys into, but they're not going to be anything that makes you feel better about the Zach LaVine trade at the end of the year. So the Bulls can't move him. They can't move Vooch. They're not sure about Lonzo if they don't want to take back a long-term contract, which is the original reason why the Zach LaVine Denver Nuggets trade fell through. Reportedly was one of the players the Nuggets wanted the Bulls to take back. The Bulls said no to. So that's where we're at with Bulls rumors. I think we'll probably end up wrapping tomorrow's show up with the exact same thing, because we will be less than 24 hours away from the deadline when we wrap up tomorrow night's show. But for now, at least at this very moment at 9:52 Central Time, it feels like this roster, minus the new members of the Bulls, is likely what we're going to see post-trade deadline. That, to me, feels like a loss. Even as a win and a night where Modest goes off, that feels like a loss for Bulls fans and the Bulls franchise, because now you have a chance to stay right in the middle if you keep these guys on the roster instead of fully tanking out. But that's the Bulls' way, it seems. All right, that does it for us. Joe George here, Locked On Sports Chicago. Hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel, Locked On Bulls. They're doing great content every single day. Obviously, a lot of it's around the deadline right now. So make sure you go over to Locked On Sports Chicago, Locked On Bulls on YouTube. Hit subscribe there as well. And you can find both of our podcasts, the audio version, on the Locked On Bulls audio feed, wherever you get your podcasts. Apple, Spotify, wherever you can find it. So thanks for checking us out. We appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for people in the comments. We will talk to you next time, which is tomorrow night.